I think we'll just start. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. And I want to give special thanks to Randy Young, who, of course, all you residents know, and she puts on just wonderful events, not only the concerts, but events like this, and then, of course, all your great field trips. So, it's great to have someone like that who organizes all those great events for you. It's a great place, because my mother's here too. So, anyway,
enough already.
I think that was a starting gun.
Try again, Wally. Keep going.
Okay.
Let's see what happens.
Everybody still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how many of you are watching the Olympics? Yeah, you enjoying them?
Oh, you bet.
Let me ask another question. How many of you were former athletes, any sport at any level? What were you?
Skier.
Skier, all right. Winter Olympics. Anybody else?
Tennis.
Tennis. Very good. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Football and baseball.
Football and baseball. Great.
Swimming and
Did a
basketball.
little of that myself.
Wally, this gentleman over here.
Yeah.
Okay, I have trouble seeing. Oh, Wally.
Yeah, football, track.
Oh, all right. Football being American or European?
No, American.
Yeah.
In high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about football in anywhere but the United States, of course it means soccer.
Right.
So,
Football.
yeah. So, what I'm going to talk about today, and I'll go through this somewhat sequentially, but I'm going to give you a little bit of history on the Olympic Games, both the ancient and the modern, let you know where all this came from and where we are today. I'll talk about my event, which was Modern Pentathlon, which I'll get into in more detail later. And then I'll talk about what it takes to be a world-class and an Olympic athlete. Okay, and then I'm going to tell you about what sports taught me and how it's influenced my life. And then I'll have some time for some questions and answers, if anybody has any. So, does anybody know when the Olympics started?
In Greece.
Yeah, well that's right. Long time ago in Greece. Okay.
1800.
Yeah, the 1800, I heard that's the modern
20
Olympics.
years ago.
Okay, let me surprise you. The Olympic Games were first started in 776 BC.
Before my childhood.
Okay?
It's close, 1800.
They've been around for a while. And of course, they were founded by Heracles. You may know of him from some of your ancient readings. But Heracles founded it. And he founded it for his father. And his father was Zeus. And Zeus was the the father of all gods and man. That was his title. And he was the god of sky and thunder. So Heracles founded these for his father, and it was to bring together the villages, the city-states, and the kingdoms of that time to compete in a friendly competition. Now, what I wish was still valid today, but back when they started them, all conflicts amongst any of the city-states, villages, kingdoms that were in process were halted during the Olympic Games. And that went on for millenniums. And so if you can stop and think of today, Palestine and Israel, Afghan, Iraq, it'd be nice if they all stopped for 17 days, but that's for another time, I guess. But anyway, that's what they were founded for. Not only a tribute to Zeus, but as well as to stop wars for a small period of time. Now, the Olympics were a combination of what is called athletics and combat, dating all the way back then. Athletics, if you ever read it in the papers or see it in articles, what athletic really means is track and field. It's called track and field in America, but around the world it's athletics. And combat was an integral part of the ancient games. There are still many of the events today that were started in 1776 BC. Fencing was one of them, which was a combat sport. And of course, they called it sword fighting back then because it was part of combat. What we call javelin today, that was spears. And it was how accurate you could throw a spear to hit your target, your enemy. There's a few things that are still around. Wrestling, still got wrestling. One of the things they did drop, of course, was chariot racing. You don't see that today. But in horse racing, you'll see the trotters with the carriages. That's an offshoot of chariot racing. Okay, now, Heracles, when he built the arena to house these first games, he walked off 200 steps in a straight line. And he called that, in Greek, stadio, which in Latin means stadium. And what those two words mean are stage. So whenever you go to a stadium, you're literally going to a stage. Now, the 200 steps that he marked off are what we know today as the 200-meter dash. Of course, now it's on a curve and not a straightaway, but that's how all this is carried forward into the future, where we are today. So you can see how old some of these events are. Okay, now, some of the early participants back in those early AD years, or excuse me, BC years, are people you know, but you don't know. They came from the disciplines of philosophy, medicine, mathematics, and literature. Who are they? Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Pythagoras, Hippocrates, Euripides. You've all probably read them somewhere in your past in schools. Now, the Olympics were contested, of course, every 4 years. And that started in 1776 and came all the way forward. And that is what is called the Olympiad. So it's every 4 years. Today we are celebrating the 30th Olympiad of the modern era. Now, they ended in 426 AD. So from 776 BC to 426 AD, they were contested every 4 years. Now, why did they stop in 426? Well, there was this small little army called the Romans, and they invaded Greece. And when they invaded Greece, they wanted to eliminate all pagan ceremonies and rituals. And the Olympics were one of them. And so the Olympics died in 426 AD. Now, jumping ahead to the modern Olympics. The modern Olympics were founded by a Frenchman. He was Baron Pierre de Coubertin. And in 1890, he formed what is today the International Olympic Committee. And his focus was to bring the Olympics back into the modern era and to continue the rich tradition that it had. Now, Coubertin developed the Olympic flag, which you will see it's white, total white background. It has 5 rings. And if you don't know what those rings mean, those represent the 5 continents of the world. Australia, the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Europe. That's what those 5 rings mean. You see them there on my hat, and of course you see them all over today. But they also have 5 colors, starting from the left to the right in the top row is blue, black, red, yellow on the bottom, and green. And what those colors represent is there is at least one of those colors in every flag in the world. Every nation's flag in the world has at least one of those colors. And so that's what the Olympic rings and symbol really represent. Okay, the Olympic motto he also created, which you will see, and they've actually talked about it on TV, and you see it in the media as well. And it's Citius Altius Fortius, which is Latin for faster, higher, stronger. And you will see that on all the Olympic medals, in many Olympic paraphernalia, if you will. So that's what the motto is. Now he also created the Olympic Creed. And I'll read it here to you in a minute, but these are things that you don't hear on television in the coverage. You don't read it in the newspapers or any of the other print medias because everything is basically focused on high commercialism and so on and so forth. And of course you can all represent that. But most people don't know what that Olympic Creed really is. Let me read it to you. It says, "The most important thing in the Olympics is not to win, but to take part. Just as the most important thing in life is not to triumph, but to struggle. The essential thing is not to have conquered, but to have fought well." And when was the last time you heard that on television? Everything's focused on first, second, and third. So, the first modern games were conducted in 1896. So, de Coubertin started them in 1890, contacted all the nations, brought everything together, established all the rules, the creeds, the flags, and so on and so forth. And the first one was contested in 1896. In 1896, there were 241 athletes from 18 different nations. Now compare that to London today. London has well over 10,500 athletes from 205 countries. So it's grown a bit. And this Olympics is the first Olympics that has a woman represented in every event, excuse me, in a woman from every country in the Olympics. And of course, back in the ancient times, and as well as the early modern times, it was all men. So what I attribute that to is Title IX, if you're familiar with Title IX, which, you know, let women compete in all the same sports as men. Now, there's one sport that doesn't allow men in. It's called rhythmic gymnastics. It's the one with the flags that's coming up here in a few days. That's the only one that men aren't in. Now, there are only 26 sports being contested in London. Now, those 26 sports represent over 400 events. And the way you get there, of course, gymnastics, multiple events, swimming, multiple events, track and field, multiple events, different weight classes for like boxing and weightlifting, what have you. So there's well over 400 events being contested today in London. The maximum number of sports that the Olympic Committee allows is 28. This year, they included women's boxing for the first time. They dropped baseball and softball from the last Olympics. And the next Olympics, which will be in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, they will be adding 2 more sports in. Golf is one of them, and rugby will be the other. So there's never more than 28 sports in the Olympics, but multiple events. Okay, let's see. Now, this, let me tell you, when you watch TV and you see the coverage, and all the focus is on, of course, the premier events, swimming and the gymnastics and so on and so forth. And like I say, there's a representative from all 205 countries in the world today in London. Now let me just tell you, there are no losers in the Olympics. None whatsoever. They simply award some finishing positions. But if you stop and think, you are seeing the best athletes from their respective countries. And they don't just automatically get in just because you're, say, a small country and say, hey, I want to go to the Olympics. You have to meet minimum Olympic standards. So even if you're, say, a fast runner or a fast swimmer, if you don't meet those Olympic standards, I don't care what country you don't get in. And so there are no losers. Absolutely not. Now, let me just give you an example. If you took swimming, which of course just ended here 3 days ago, if you took the 8th place finisher in each of the swimming events, took all 8 place finishers, put them all, say, in one college, they would be the national champions by leaps and bounds. Because what separates 1st through 8th are hundredths of a second, tenths of a second, tenths of points, hundreds of points. And so when you see the final standings, they'll say, well, he did it in 25.0, and the 8th place finisher did it in 25.8, and everybody else was, say, in between. We're just talking about fractions of a second. So I say, there are no losers when you get to that level. Now, let me talk a little bit about my sport. My sport was Modern Pentathlon, and Penta, of course, means 5, and it's 5 totally unrelated events. And I'll get into more detail here as we go. But it also has a military background. And pentathlon was created to get the message to and from the front lines. And the courier had to run, ride, fence, shoot, and swim to get his message to enforce. Back then, it was called telecommunications, okay? They didn't have cell phones and all that. They tell people in person. They had to get there. So the telecommunication was go tell. So, it was first added, Modern Pentathlon was first added in 1912, in the Olympics in 1912, which were in Stockholm, Sweden. And they're the first American to compete in Modern Pentathlon in those games was a young second lieutenant from the Army. You may know him. He grew up to be a general. His name was George Patton. And he placed 5th in 1912. Now, when Pierre de Coubertin added the Modern Pentathlon in 1912, his belief was this, and I quote him, "Modern Pentathlon embraced the spirit of the ancient games." It was his belief that Modern Pentathlon, above all other events that tested a man's moral qualities as much as his physical resources and skills, producing thereby the ideal complete athlete, and makes it today, of course, the most difficult of all events on the Olympic program. Now, you don't hear much about Modern Pentathlon because it's an international sport. We don't have but one team, and that's the United States team in America. And they train, as I did, for international competition. It is contested by over 100 nations participated. Now, the Europeans dominated and have since day one, really. And if you think of how we train our young athletes in football, baseball, basketball, in Little League, in Europe, Modern Pentathlon is started that young. In America, we usually don't get our people in it until they're in their 20s. But we do very well. So, that's just a little background. Now, let me talk about my events, or the events. First event is riding, which is equestrian. And you ride on an English saddle on a horse that you draw from a hat to get the name of the horse. No pentathletes in any country own their own horses. They're all provided by the host country. And so, when it's time for the draw, you reach in the hat, you pull out a name, and it says, okay, that's who you're riding. Now, that's a big difference between, if you've watched any of the equestrian on TV, those people own their horses, and many of them are multi-$1,000 horses, and they're well trained, and take nothing away from that. But in pentathlon, like I say, you're drawing a horse you don't even know. Now, when I was competing, you had 15 minutes prior to the time you went on course. You got to go bridle the horse, saddle the horse, get on him, figure out if he pulls to the left or the right, and you could take him over a maximum of 2 practice jumps. And then you went out on course. You either knew how to ride or you didn't. And you had to figure that horse out very quickly. Rules changed a bit since I competed. Now they give them 20 minutes, and they let them go over 5 jumps. But that's just a little background on the riding. Now let me tell you a little bit about the jumps. They're a combination of hunter and jumper, which you see today, which are contested, of course, in equestrian. But it's not on a flat surface. There are different types of jumps. And let me tell you the most difficult. You will see in equestrian, they have what they call a double jump. Okay, the horse will go over one, take a couple steps, go over another one. In pentathlon we do that too, but we also have a triple jump, which is the equivalent of a horse running the hurdles. Over one, couple steps, over another, couple steps, over another. Okay? And let me tell you, horses don't like it. And they'll go to the left, they'll go to the right, they'll stop, they'll throw you off. Okay? So, like I said, you either knew how to ride or you didn't. The most challenging jump that I frequented when I was in competition was a simple wooden picnic table. The benches, okay? On the left-hand side, they had a mannequin, okay? On the right-hand side, they had a big old wind-up alarm clock, okay? And when you go out on course, you would come around, and particularly this jump, and before you got there, one of the officials would go out and flick the alarm on. So as you approach that jump, one, there's a person, according to the horse, sitting, and there's this alarm clock going off to the right, and you got to go right over the middle. That was one of the most challenging jumps I ever, and I did it very successfully. I had a good horse that day. Okay, the next event, fencing. Now fencing, anybody familiar with fencing? Yep, okay. The fencing is contested in 3 different blades. One's called a foil, and the foil, your body trunk is all that's valid as a target. So your head and your arms are excluded and anything below the waist. So it's only your trunk. Second blade is called a saber. Saber is what they call the slashing blade. And I'll show them to you later. But everything above the waist is a valid target. And you're basically trying to literally cut somebody's head off. This goes back to the combat, you know. And the third blade, which is the one that is contested in pentathlon, is called an épée. And an épée, the entire body is valid, from the top of your head to the toes. And I'll show you the different blades as we go. Now, in pentathlon, or I should say in fencing, a fencing bout is 5 touches. Whoever gets the first 5 touches wins the bout. In pentathlon, 1 touch. You get 1 shot, you're dead or alive. And you have a time frame of 1 minute per bout. And if at the end of 1 minute, neither one of you or your opponent has scored a point, it's a double defeat. So, it has a little urgency to it. Swimming. Swimming is simply freestyle in a 50-meter pool, 6 laps of the pool, if you've been watching London. They changed the rules a bit. Now it's down to 200. But in my day it was 300 meters. Shooting. In my day we shot 22 caliber pistols. We shot them at a turning target. The target would face you for 3 seconds, turn away for 30. And in those 3 seconds, you had to bring your weapon from you had to have your elbow on your hip. And you could not take it off your hip until that target faced you. And and in 3 seconds you had to come up, aim, get 1 round off. You did that 4 series of 5 rounds. I changed the rules again for today. Now they're shooting at 5 stand-up targets, and they're using air pistols today. And you have to hit all 5 targets, regardless of how many shots it takes. Now, for Rio in 2016, it's in development now. They're developing what I believe is going to be a laser weapon, but it will not have any bullets, pellets, or anything else. You simply shoot. You still have to hit the targets. But if you can step and think in 3 years how many 22 caliber bullets I shot. And if I could just take the casings and melt them down today, I'd probably be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in a scrap metal. And then the last event is running. In my day, it was 4,000 meters, cross country. Now, cross country, not like you see in college or in high school. Cross country in pentathlon was over logs, through the bushes, down the side of banks on your butt. I can remember one competition where we ran about 50 meters in about knee-deep water, all the way down. And you can see it's to get the message through. That was the whole point of it. And so the running is not like any track event where you can get up, set a cadence, and just run. It's all broken. The ground's broken, it's not flat. So it's just up and down. Well, they changed that again too. Now it's 3,000 meters instead of 4. 4,000 meters was 2.8 miles, just to give you a reference. Now what they've also done is take the shooting and the running and they combined them. And they combined them similar to biathlon in the Winter Olympics, where the skier has a rifle and he skis, he goes up to a point and they shoot. Well, now they've done that with pentathlon. And so now they call it the combined, and they run 200 meters to the shooting station. They grab their pistol and they have to hit all 5 of those targets, regardless of how long it takes and how many rounds you shoot. Okay? Then they can take off on the first 1,000 meter run. They come back around, shooting station again, they do that 3 times. Okay? Now, the way pentathlon is scored, because each event has 1,000 maximum points. Now when they combined the shooting and the running, they handicap, after the end of the 3rd event, they handicap your score. Okay? And so the guy who's the head gets to lead off. Okay, now if he's a lousy shot, and it takes him 5 minutes to hit 5 shots, that's counted against his run. And then he has to take off. And so it is set up so that whoever crosses the finish line first wins, period. So if you were going in at first, you may come out at 10th, depending on what shot you are. If you get up there and go bang, 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 and take off again, it's buying you time. So those are the 5 events, and as you can see, they're totally 5 unrelated events, and they take special skills and coordination. To give you an example, when I first started training and competing, it took me 1 year to acclimate my body to be able to go full speed in all 5 events every day, in one day. So it's, you can see what it means. Now, let me move ahead. Let me talk about world-class athletes, or Olympic athletes. And I wrote this a while back, but very simply, when you look at a world-class or an Olympic athlete, you only see the end result. Okay? It's just the tip of the iceberg. None of us were handed anything. We got there through hard work. In the morning, in the evening, all day long. I trained 7 days a week, an average of 12 hours a day. Okay. It's what you can't see that really matters. The will to push on and the mindset that pushes you, or pushes our bodies to do our event over and over and over and again and again and again. And I'm talking about all athletes, regardless of the sport. That's what you do. So when you see gymnastics and the women and those outstanding routines they do, stop and think how many times they have fallen off, got back up. My daughter, back there in the red shirt, was a former elite gymnast. She trained with Bella Caroli, who's infamous, and she definitely would have made it to the Olympics, but she blew her knees out. So let me tell you also in gymnastics, it is the only sport in the Olympic program that is 100% injury. The only sport. Gymnasts are all injured at one point or another. Okay, let's see, where? Okay, it's the outside of the body that really shows the end result of all that work, okay? Our achievements are told from within. The end result is the process, of course, of hard work. Our bodies are more than sweat and pain. They require will and equal parts of pride and insecurity, because nothing is given. You've got to compete for everything. Most importantly, the recognition that getting to the top of Mount Everest in your sport takes years and years of sacrifice. And you can see that in any of the Olympic athletes you see today. Now, you make the World Championship and the Olympic team not by luck. Can't buy your way in. Nobody awards it to you. Okay? It's earned. And I can't underestimate it's earned and all that effort. So, when you're going through all this training, you're not training to make the Olympic or the World Championship team or events. You're training to win it. Getting onto a World Championship team or an Olympic team is just one step. All that training is designed to win it. Okay. Now, another thing that's most important, because we talked about the first, second, third, you know, the medals, gold, bronze, silver, which, by the way, prior to 1912, the gold medal was solid gold. Now they're all silver and gold plated. And if I had one of those, say 1900, I could take it down, and with the price of gold today, it'd be worth a few bucks. And what's most important is not the color of the medal that you come home with, if you do come home with one. It's the colors of the uniform that you came in. Red, white, and blue, America, or any other country. Now, believe it or not, well, I shouldn't say that. Believe it. All you ever hear about is first, second, and third, right? Who won the gold, the silver, and the bronze? Did you know that you get awards up to 8th place? The 8th place finishers in every event get an award. Of course, you never hear about it. It's not in the paper, it's not on TV. And it's always up to the host country what that award will be. It could be a certificate, it could be a plaque, it could be a tray, it could be a ribbon, or anything else they so desire. But it recognizes you as a participant and a winner up to the first 8 places. But you never hear that on TV. If it's not first, second, or third, you're nowhere, or you're no good. Or, you know, we have that mentality that, this time we only got 4th or only got 5th. Well, how come you're not good? Okay, let me tell you quickly what sports taught me. And I started my athletic career, thanks to my mother, back in the 4th grade. And I was a competitive swimmer for the YMCA. I played Little League football, Little League baseball. And I did all the things that 7- and 8-year-old kids did. Now, some of those traits, I can give you all the adjectives that they taught me, and particularly at the world class level: teamwork, discipline, patience, commitment, fortitude, pain and injury, blood, literally, sweat and tears, and you've heard it on ABC's Wild World of Sports over the years, but I have experienced the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. And all those things have taught me over the years, in whatever I did, to continue to apply the same concepts. Now, how did these things affect my life after competitive athletics? Well, my business career. And I don't care what business you're in, it's competitive. You work your way up when you're trying to. I was fortunate enough to work my way all the way up to senior executive manager. It also, more importantly, applied to most of you who don't know me and don't know that 5 years ago I had a stroke. Affected my entire left side. I spent 13 months in physical therapy 2 to 3 times a week, and all I said to myself, I'm back training for the Olympics again. And I have literally put myself back together. Doctors tell me today I'm about 93 or 94% of what I was before my stroke. I know where I'm deficient, but a lot of people don't recognize it. I'm also a diabetic. I have been for over 40 years. And it's helped me to deal with that, control that. Of course, back when I was competing, I was lean and mean, 50 pounds lighter. Of course, 50 years younger. And I had a well-balanced meal, and then of course exercising every day, and I'll tell you, didn't have any problem with diabetes then. Now, let me just say one thing about inspiration, and particularly moms. Because when you see on television a lot of athletic events, or even on the talk shows, and people are saying, "Hi Mom, you know, and it was my mother, gave me all the inspiration." Thanks, Mom.
Well,
Let me tell you, what her mother taught her, and both of them taught me, and this was back when I was in the 7th grade. She said, "It's always better to be looked over than overlooked." My mother also said, when you see a lot of this paraphernalia, and particularly the press releases and what have you, my mother used to always tell me, "You're only as good as your last press release." And if you stop and think about it, it's absolutely true. So, whether you win or you lose. Now, let me just point out a few things. Of course, this is my fencing uniform. Of course, the masks today are all clear plastic, so you can see them out a whole lot better. These are the blades. This is what's called the foil. It's got the little end, okay? Like I say, it's just the trunk. This is a saber. This is the slashing blade. Take your neck, take your arm. This is the one that we fence in Modern Pentathlon. It's called the épée. And they're electric. There's a cord that goes through your uniform, plugs into here. This is it depresses, and when it depresses, triggers a light, means you win. So it's all electronic. So those are the 3 blades. A couple of pictures of me when I was doing it. You know.
You won.
Settle that. Okay. Let me tell you the importance of this poster. It's one of 2 that I have.
All your friends and family are here.
Yeah. This picture, this individual, if you remember back 1964, his name was Bob Hayes. Bob Hayes was the first in the 100-meter dash to break 10 seconds. Okay? He was a teammate of mine. I was at a lot of track meets with him. Hell of a nice guy. But he went on to become a receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. So that's one of the official posters. The other one, which I don't have here today, but it's all white, and it's got the rising sun. Big red one, and it says San Diego bottom, Tokyo 1964. Here's an Olympic medal. And you'll see on the back, Pierre de Coubertin, who started it. You'll see Citius, Altius, Fortius on the back, mosaic, and it'll show the Olympic flame, shows the events, so on and so forth. So that's my Olympic medal. This jacket was from the Masters Nationals back in 1990, which I competed in and won my era, my age group back then. And these are all the major things that I competed in. Some of the pins, my Olympic pins, some of the pins I've swapped with others, 1984 pins, what have you. Down here, of course, my singlet, that was for track. Of course, you wear proudly the USA. These were my running shoes. That is 1964 Olympic trials dirt. And it was also the last time I wore them. And they're Adidas. Okay? Everybody wore Adidas back then. Nike wasn't even a brain child at that point. Okay? So I wore Adidas. I had another pair, which were my warm-up shoes that have well over 5,000 running miles on them. Some pictures of the riding, me going over his jump. This was this triad one. It's me. We're seeing it there in the picture. That was from the 8th International competition. This is my poster from the 1962 World Championships. We're in Mexico City. One of my, as my mom says, you're only as good as your last press release. Anybody familiar with this magazine? That's me. Swimming. Okay, and this was an article about pentathlon at the time. You'll see, there's one of the water jumps for the horse.
What year was that, Wally?
1964. And then there's one of some running and one of some fencing. So that's what that is. This, one of my warm-ups says pentathlon in the back. Actually, it's the same, exactly the same one that's in this picture when I'm jumping over this fence. I know it's the same one. Now, this, of course, one of my favorites. I made it into the Sports Illustrated. This, of course, can't beat a medal. But I tell you, the most important trophy and win I ever had was this one. And it's a 3rd place. And it's the Mayor of Montreal, Canada's trophy, where the World Championships were held. I was not favored to place anywhere close to the top 50. And I got 3rd. And I beat 4 Olympians doing it. 4 fencing Olympians, not pentathlon. So this is one of my pride and joys, because it was one of those magical days, I guess. So, with that, anybody got any questions?
Did you ever get any endorsements?
That's an excellent question. Let me explain it. In my era, and up through 1972, all Olympics were amateur athletes. There was no commercialization. If you accepted any money for any reason, you were disqualified. And if you remember a guy named Jim Thorpe, okay, and he played semi-pro baseball for a while, they took away his 2 Olympic medals.
He got him back.
That I don't remember, but they probably were after he was dead. But it wasn't. Well, let me back up. The International Olympic Committee president during my era was a guy named Avery Brundage. Okay, and Avery Brundage was an old curmudgeon, in my opinion. I'd been in his office. I'd met him in New York, but he was dead against any professionalism at all, and he was dead against any commercialism. And he retired in 1972, and in 1974, Summerich, who replaced him, Juan Antonio Summerich, as the IOC president, he then allowed professionals in. Okay, because if you think back then, there was no way we were competing against the Russians and the East Germans, because they were all the pros, both summer and winter. It was in 1972 when Avery Brundage retired. There was $2 million in the IOC coffers. which was a lot of money back then. In 1976, it was 429 million. And that's when they opened it up to commercialism. And of course, now you watch 5 minutes of Olympics and 5 minutes of commercials on it. Okay? And that's, everybody buys the symbol. They're buying the rings to put on their product, to say, I'm a proud sponsor. And of course, it generates, today, billions of dollars of revenue. So, does that answer your question? Anybody else?
I got one back here.
Uh-oh. This is my brother.
How in the world was badminton applied in 28 sports, and why not croquet then?
Well,
You know, really, I mean, you know, badminton in the Olympics, I mean, what?
stay tuned, okay? There have been lots of events that have been added and deleted. In almost every Olympics, there is something dropped and something added. But it never goes over 28 sports. And of course, I don't know if you've heard about the badminton in this one. You know, they would throw them out because they were intentionally trying to lose to get themselves in a better
bracket.
exactly, against weaker teams that they could beat.
So,
And that's totally against any of the Olympic.
in a
I'm sorry?
28 sport, you know, so would that like include, would that badminton be like within volleyball, tennis, anything with a net? Is that how they figure it in?
Yep.
Curious.
Yes, ma'am.
I just heard last night that gold medalists are paid $25,000 along with their medal.
Yeah,
And
10,000, 15
silver
on the
gets
silver and
15.
10 on the bronze, that's what I heard.
And
I was surprised at that.
that's one number. That if you go back to Russia with a gold medal, it's a whole lot more than that. And a lot of it is not even represented in numerical values. They get housings and cars. You know, it's every